Well, 'tis the season, if you are a hunter, to be asking all the other hunters you know, did you get your buck? Postseason is after the big letdown, unless you got your buck. But what about next year? This winter is the season we should all be preparing for our next hunts. What did we do wrong last time? What did we do right? What should we do to increase our odds the next time around? And I have got a treat for us today, someone who can really help with this, because Tate Bradfield is a professional hunting guide. He guides for elk, he guides for mule deer, he guides competent hunters, he guides incompetent hunters. He even hunts himself from time to time. Have you ever gotten anything?
No.
So he's going to have us a lot of advice for what not to do. But before we dive into that, I have got to say thank you to one of my patrons who sent me an early Christmas present last Christmas. Oh, this is pretty funny. You all get it, right? Targets. Everybody's been telling me to put up fresh targets because it gets so confusing. So this guy, great sense of humor, he sent me some targets for Christmas. So thank you, Steve. I appreciate the help. Betsy, you have to post those targets every time. Now let's get down to the nitty-gritty, guys. How can we improve our chances for being successful in our next hunting seasons? We've got a lot of time to get ready. Some of this, I think, is going to involve learning how to shoot your bow and or rifles properly, right?
Very much.
But also understanding how to communicate with your partners. I know we've talked about that a little bit, Tate, right? Mm-hmm. Well, can you kind of enumerate for us the 3 or 4 or 5 essentials that we can start working on now?
You know, and so to start with, I think that the 4 or 5 essentials is going to depend on what type of hunting you're doing, obviously. Okay. But my specialty is in Western hunting. I couldn't necessarily give people advice on how to hunt whitetail. As good as an elk hunter as I am, that's probably how bad I am at whitetail. But I would say that there's probably 4 main things that people need to work on from what I've seen with clients.
Okay.
Including myself too. First one is probably shooting, because it doesn't matter how hard you work and how close you get to an animal if you miss what you're aiming at.
Good point.
And then you still have a great experience, I guess. But the second one is probably communication with either a guide, a hunting partner, a mentor. That's also very important. Third, I would probably say is being in shape. And the fourth, the fourth is your mental state during a hunt.
Oh, that's a hard one. Let's tackle that last.
Yes, it's a very difficult one.
Yeah, the easiest thing, and I think what most people are going to fixate on, of course, is the equipment. Which rifle, which cartridge, because that's always the easy fix.
Yes.
All of us tend to believe that it's not really our fault that we didn't get the buck, it's the rifle.
We just need something different, right?
Yeah, we need to buy the right tool, and then we'll be successful. So we've gone many shows on cartridges and bullets for elk and deer and all the rest of it. I don't think we need to rehash it all. Can we sum it up by saying, whether you're hunting with a muzzleloader or a bow or a centerfire rifle or an old, even a spear, I guess, whatever, spend some time to determine which tool you think is going to work best for you. Visit with your friends. Do a lot of research. Obviously, online, you can find 50 different opinions on any one cartridge. So get that stuff done, but get the equipment early enough to practice and train with it. And we'll do a whole session here on practice and training. And I have, in my experience, found that virtually any legal centerfire cartridge for elk hunting, deer hunting, in whatever state you're in, works if you use the right bullet and you apply it properly. Does that sound in your experience?
In my experience, I mean, I've killed a couple elk with a 243. That's probably the minimum I would recommend. But really, it doesn't matter as long as you're hitting them in the right spot.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
You
the right bullet, too.
With the right bullet. You need, like, if I was going to, I wouldn't recommend this, obviously, but if I shot an elk with a 22-250, let's say, I'd want to be less than 100 yards or 150 yards. Yeah. And I would probably use like a monometal bullet or a bonded bullet.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people who specialize in taking elk with 22-250s, believe it or not.
I've seen a bison get shot with a 22-250.
Really?
Yeah. and it killed it in one shot. But he hit it right behind the ear.
Oh,
perfect shot placement, right?
Well, that's right. Frank Glazer, the wolfman from Alaska, back in the early part of the 20th century, was living off the land in a cabin, mushing with his dogs, trapping for fur, hunting meat commercially for the not the railroad, but the highway department. They were building a highway up to Fairbanks. Primitive stuff, but he was in charge of keeping himself and a lot of other people alive by getting meat, and he used a lot of different rifles. I think he started off with a 30-06, but by the time it was all over, he had determined that the best, most effective rifle for taking all of Alaska's big game animals, with the exception of big grizzly bears, was a 220 Swift, probably using a 48 grain bullet.
Yeah,
because that's back in the 30s when that came out.
That's screaming.
Yeah. But a lot of guys say that. There was that ranger down in the Grand Canyon who, back in the days when they had a little more sense, was culling feral burros and horses down there. I think it was mostly burros that the old miners had left down there. And he was saying they were getting upwards to 600 pounds, big animals.
Holy cow.
And he used 30-06s, 8x57 Mausers, I forget what all else. But he tried that 220 Swift and said it was the surest, fastest killer of everything.
Yeah.
So this isn't to say, guys, that this is going to be the greatest elk rifle ever or cartridge ever, but a lot of guys who used it extensively thought it was. So there's something behind it, regardless.
Yeah, I mean, there is some danger there. I actually agree with you. I've shot some big animals with small calibers. I've shot deer with a 223, and it killed them dead. The danger is that there's less of a margin of error in some regards, right? So if you shoot them with a smaller bullet,
probably right.
Right, it's not gonna. If you hit them a little bit far back, you're not gonna have the same forgiveness as if you use a 30 cal. So you have to be very confident and competent with a rifle of that size.
That brings up a great point too, which is even with a big bullet, I mean, pick your diameter. This is a 45, but a 50 even. There's not a lot of diameter there, so it's like, well, if you miss a little far back, that bullet's not going to tear a lot more tissue that's vital tissue that you need to tear than a smaller bullet either. So don't make the mistake of thinking because you've got a bigger caliber, it's going to make up for sloppy shooting.
And it never does. So I've had many elk. Actually, I've never had an elk with a client ever wounded with a 6.5 Creedmoor. I've never had
Wait
one.
a minute.
Yeah.
You're saying that you've had clients shoot elk with a 6.5 Creedmoor, and they've killed them but not wounded them and lost them.
I've never had one lost.
See, now some guy wrote in not too long ago and said, "Oh, I'm just sick of hearing about this 6.5 wound more." They think they can't kill anything with it.
So here's the thing that I've found is that 6.5 Creedmoor 243, maybe not optimal for elk, but definitely big enough to kill elk at reasonable hunting ranges. And I think the biggest thing is that it's like, oh, they wound so many animals. Most of the time, if you're not a very competent hunter and you're doing research, what's one of the calibers that comes up the most? It's the 6.5 Creedmoor. It's on a lot of videos. A lot of match shooters use it. It's just a very available rifle cartridge, and it's simple for people that are getting into it because it's easy to find ammunition, all that kind of stuff. It also recoils very little. So a lot of the time, it's actually the newer hunters that are hunting with a lighter caliber weapon. So is it actually the 6.5 Creedmoor's fault, or is it the shooter's fault?
Bingo. That's a great point. Yeah. And I'd have to say it's the shooter's fault. I mean, it's almost always the shooter's fault. Now and then you have a bullet failure. And it's generally the bullet breaks up on the outside before it gets to the vitals. It doesn't happen very often, but often enough that we all pretty much know about it. Don't use too frangible of a bullet that breaks up and doesn't get inside, and et cetera, et cetera. But that's an excellent point about novices using the lighter recoiling 6.5 Creedmoor, and that's why you're seeing some wounding losses. Yeah,
it used to be the 243. So I was talking to Joseph Von Benedict, and he said he was doing an interview with a guy that would run bloodhounds in Texas.
Okay.
And he said, what's the one cartridge that, like, majority of animals are wounded with? And he said it's a 6.5 Creedmoor. And he's like, oh, why do you think that is? He said, well, it used to be the 243. But that's the new hunter cartridge. And the 243 used to be the new hunter cartridge.
Okay. So it's new hunters that just don't shoot that well yet.
Yeah.
Get excited mostly.
Excited, they miss.
I remember those days. Oh my gosh. I shook so bad I couldn't hit the proverbial broadside of a barn.
I think I missed at least 8 deer before I finally hit one when I was like 12 years old. And my dad, we'll talk about this story in a little while, but my dad got sick of it and he shot the deer. So just to go off of shooting, right? Caliber wide, we, in my courses this year, so if you're not familiar with my courses, we take people out hunting, and we have a few different courses, but in this particular course, we actually take you out hunting. We teach you how to hunt elk while we're trying to kill elk.
Oh, wow.
Which is really fun. And
so it's a school, a training session, as well as an actual hunt.
Yeah. And that's called my semi-guided hunt. Okay. It's not like truly guided, but it's semi-guided. That's why we call it semi-guided. But we had it was a really good year. We had about 54% shot opportunity with archery equipment and about 80-ish, 85% shot opportunity with rifle.
So that's semi-guided. Does that mean that you are always guiding your clients to the animal before they've got their shot opportunity, or do some of them do it themselves?
Some of them, like the guy, so one of our clients killed an elk with his bow. He did it completely on his own. After we taught him for a few days, he killed it the last evening of the hunt.
Wow.
We were not with him, and he did it completely on his own. I asked him I was like, man, I'm kind of feeling like my job's at stake here, and I was like, do you feel like you would have killed this without us helping? He was like, not at all. So the things that we teach can help people. What I'm trying to do is set people up for a lifetime rather than just have them buy a guided hunt every year. I want to make it a little bit more affordable for people to get in what they're doing.
Sure.
But the crazy thing is that we would take everybody out and we'd have a short shooting instruction course. Basically what we would do is we'd have our clients shoot out to a certain range. And if they couldn't, let's say that they couldn't hit 3 out of 3 at 400 yards, then their max was 300 yards. We didn't ever really have people shoot past 450. That's kind of my limit with most clients.
Yeah,
was about 4 to 450.
Yeah.
And I like to see where everybody's confident and competent out to as well. But out of those 84% shot opportunity, and we took 12 people a week during rifle season, so a total of 24 rifle hunters, we had 5 elk killed out of probably close to 18 people shooting.
18 shots at elk.
Yeah.
And
a couple of those guys didn't actually shoot. They just totally froze too.
Freaked out. They wanted to shoot but couldn't?
Yeah.
Okay.
And an elk at, 100 yards, 150 yards. I called one bull into 45 yards, and the guy missed it 3 times with a 300 Win Mag. Or a 270, I think is what it was actually.
Okay, that's going to take us to the hunter prep stage of this whole business in a bit.
Yes. And so, the disparity between their shooting capabilities while in a controlled environment versus versus being in the
front of an elk, yeah.
And you get in front of a bull elk, and all of a sudden you worked so hard and you've hiked so many miles, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's about to happen, and then you miss.
Yeah.
That really brings people down, which goes into the last portion, which is also your mental.
The mental game.
The mental game.
Yeah, we'll get into all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Let's wrap up the rifle and cartridge stuff. So, as we've just said, pretty much any legal cartridge. If you're in Idaho or Montana, where the 22-250 is legal for big game, and you really want to use it, you don't like recoil, et cetera, and you can control your shots, you don't shake too much, you're an expert or something along these lines, it can work. Not ideal. On the other end of the spectrum, you jump up to the 45s or even the 338s, there might be too much recoil for you there, and you can't handle it. It would certainly be effective on the animal, but if there's too much recoil, you probably don't want to mess with that.
Yes.
So whatever you're using, be the competent commander.
Yes.
Who's using it.
And here's what I tell people too is like on year 1, if you're used to hunting with a 243 or a 308, bring that out. Okay. But don't feel like you're going to stay there though. It's okay to become more comfortable and use a bigger rifle eventually.
Yeah.
Right?
I like that.
Use the biggest rifle you're comfortable with within reason. I personally love a 7 mag for elk, 300 Win Mag for elk.
Yep.
270 is great too.
Yep.
Kind of those mid-grade calibers. I don't think there's very many people that would look at a 300 Win Mag and be like, that's not a great elk cartridge.
Right. Yeah. And going back to that 270, and that's a great one because you're probably going to hunt deer 5 to 10 times more often than elk.
Yes.
And that's an outstanding cartridge for that.
Yep.
Pretty similar trajectories to the bigger ones like the 7 Rem Mag and the 300 Win Mag and things, so it keeps them sort of in the wheelhouse. So,
yeah.
All right, great point. Now, you've got your rifle, you've got your cartridge. We won't even go into bullets. That's a whole nother show, but use the right bullet.
Spend 3 hours talking about bullets.
Yeah. So now you've got to become competent shooting that rifle. And as you've already said, they're probably pretty good on paper targets. We're going to roll over into the wild animals when we get there.
Yeah.
What is a great way for people to train? And I know everybody out there knows sitting on a bench punching holes into a tight group at 100 yards is not the way to train for hunting.
Yeah. Yeah. I know there's a lot of people that, like, I did a video with Jim Harmer from Backfire a little while ago, and my scope got knocked off, and I was supposed to shoot like a little milk jug at ranges out to 600 yards. And my scope got knocked off. We didn't actually add this into the video with Jim. We didn't think it was actually mattered that much, but now it actually matters to me because I think there was part of it. I think I shot at like a total of 40 or 45 jugs. And at one point I missed like all 5 of jugs in a row. And then I missed a couple more too. And then I shot at a rock and I was shooting like 2.5 feet high.
Oh, so your scope had inadvertently gotten bumped off.
Okay. Which is not an excuse. Like I was still missing, and I'd set my scope up incorrectly. That's why. But that can happen in the field too, right? So knowing how to set up your equipment matters. But also most people, like I guess where I'm going with that is I don't give a whole lot of credit to bench rest shooting in some regards because it isn't necessarily applicable for Western style situations. So you could be a really good shot when you have a lead sled and all that kind of stuff. I can hold a group that's less than half MOA sometimes. But if you're out in the field and you're shooting over a tripod, kneeling downhill or across a canyon downhill, it's a very different situation.
Sure.
You're not going to be able to get that same control.
Yeah.
So like let's take, for example, the guy that missed the elk a couple of times from 45 yards. He was obviously devastated afterwards because he'd worked very hard to get to that point. But he had, he's come from, I think New York is where he was from. It's pretty flat. And there's mountains in there, but you're not shooting at inclines and declines standing.
Like there are
in rocky shale where you're sliding while you're standing and all that kind of fun
the
stuff.
famous sliding elk shot.
Which happens, right? So it's really hard in some regards for these guys to prepare for these situations because if they're in a certain area, like let's say you're from Kansas, it's going to be really hard to practice shooting downhill or uphill.
Okay.
Even if you can practice shooting out to 400 yards. But what I generally tell guys is if you can get confident hitting like a paper plate sized target, you're going to want to practice shooting not just from a bench rest. You're going to want to shoot over a tripod. You're going to want to shoot prone. You're going to want to shoot kneeling. You're going to want to shoot offhand. You're going to want to do a bunch of jumping jacks or run a quarter mile and then try and hit a target at 200 or 300 yards because that's likely the scenario you're actually going to be in. You're going to have to cover a little bit of country, get closer to the animal. You might be breathing hard when you have to take the shot.
Yeah, so you're basically saying that you have to be competent and prepared to shoot from any field position that you're likely to bump into. You want to replicate real hunting situations when you're training. Practicing,
yes,
not sitting on a bench.
You were telling me a story when you were in Texas, and you were like, you were telling me how you were walking through the woods, and you were whitetail hunting.
Yeah, that to me was it exemplified what I think most hunters assume is the perfect hunt or the perfect shot.
Yeah.
And when I think about it, you go like, how can I brag about killing an animal? but we can because that's our job. The same. Wherever you're doing, if you do your job properly, you just, that is perfect. Whether you're a cook or you're making pottery or you're pounding a fence. If you have your skills developed and you do everything properly and it all comes together just the way it is supposed to, you get this feeling of competence and success. And that's what I had with this one. I'm still hunting. My idea is that I'm going to move so slowly that I'm going to see the animal before it sees me. I'm going to get a clean shot. I'm going to make that shot. I'm prepared to shoot him from any position. Ended up being offhand because the deer came out of the thicket about 90 to 100 yards away. I caught that movement because I was moving so slowly when I'm still hunting and looking so carefully that bingo, I caught that movement and I started raising my rifle. About the time he's turned and saw that little bit of motion, and you know how they are, it's what's that? Could it be another deer? Who knows what? So while he pondered what I was making that final adjustment, making sure I had a clear shot, very calm for some strange reason, and broke the shot. I just knew it was over.
Yeah.
And right where I was expecting that bullet to land is where it landed. And one and done, in his tracks, high shoulder shot. You can't get much more perfect than that.
No.
And through that whole experience, I just had this calm feeling of this is what I've been training all my life to do. This is the way it's supposed to work. It doesn't always work that way, but I think that is our goal. And the more you practice in those field positions you're talking about to be prepared to do that, the more confidence you have when the real opportunity presents itself.
Yeah.
You don't start doubting yourself, saying, oh, I wonder if I can make that shot. We always tell people, if you don't know you can make the shot, don't shoot.
Yeah.
That's what determines your maximum range. And it might be 45 yards if you get too excited. And we've been there.
and I think what I would boil a lot of this down to is what I would call muscle memory or mental memory.
Yeah.
Right? Because your mind is a muscle, your arms are a muscle, everything's a muscle. You knew that certain things were going to go the way you wanted them to go because you had trained for that.
Yeah.
You knew exactly what to do in a certain situation. And it may not have been exactly that same situation. You may have gone down on one knee and shot a little bit in a kneeling position, maybe.
Yeah.
If maybe you have to get underneath the foliage to look up at the
Right.
animal, right?
Yep. Good plan.
But you know all those different things. A lot of the people that come out with me, because of what I do, are brand new to hunting in general, or at the very least, brand new to elk hunting, or have elk hunted for a few years and have been so frustrated they feel like they need a mentor. So in my line of work, I have to deal with people that are very inexperienced in a lot of regards. And a lot of them were amazing shots. They could easily hit targets up to 600, 700, 800 yards, right? But when you put an elk in front of them, they fell apart. Now, when I'm going hunting and I'm elk hunting, I don't really get excited anymore. When my clients are elk hunting, I don't really get excited anymore until there's one on the ground. Then I'm like, yeah, high five, you know? But when you're elk hunting and you get 85% shot opportunity and more than half of those people miss, it's really hard to get yourself worked up and excited because odds are over 50% that your client's about to miss that animal.
What are you're spouting all these numbers and percentages? How many clients? Well, what is the percentage of successful clients? If you put them on an elk with a reasonable shot opportunity, how many of them actually get the elk?
That depends on the situation. So here's what I have found with clients is that if we actually hang back a slightly further distance, and that allows us usually to have a little bit more time, usually the success rate and the hit rate is higher than if we're closer and it's a rushed shot. So that 45-yard shot is somewhat rushed, right? He pokes up over the brush and he shoots a little bit rushed. He wasn't maybe completely ready for it. He didn't have time to steady his breathing. It all happened very quickly because we kind of got backdoored by this elk. I was trying to call on a bull below us, and another bull came in behind us, right? Kind of behind us and down below us, and it was steep crap. So when we hang back, 300-400 yards, even 450 yards, and we make sure that they dial their scope correctly, we make sure that they breathe correctly, they're taking time to calm down, and then we have them take a couple practice trigger pulls on the animal with just dry firing.
Great technique.
They get to really calm down, and it actually usually makes for a more ethical shot. Now, if the elk are moving and it's further away, usually we're just like, let's not take the shot.
Right.
What if they're just milling around feeding and you're across a canyon at 300 or 400 yards?
You got all kinds of time. They're not alerted. You're not freaking out and thinking, I got to shoot quick. They're going to run. I got to shoot quick. Yeah, that's a good point. So actually, closing the distance, which is I usually recommend, is get as close as possible. That can kind of freak you out because that proximity to the animal gets your adrenaline up. You start getting excited and shaking and things.
Yeah.
Farther away, calm down. They don't know you're there. There's no chance they're going to detect it. You've got plenty of time.
Yep.
I like that dry firing. I use that with new shooters too, especially kids. I want to see how they react when they're pulling that trigger. Yes. I don't even tell them their rifle's unloaded. I hand it to them without a shell in the chamber, and I'll say, take that shot, and I watch them.
And then they usually,
So, wait a minute, would you have made that shot? No. What was the crosshair when that trigger broke?
Yeah.
Well, it was like up in the sky. I don't know. I didn't even see it. Well, you should have seen it. So all of that stuff. Can you do that when you're training as well, folks? When you are training, whether it's just you by yourself or you with a buddy or something.
Yeah.
Do that unloaded rifle thing and film him. Use your phone and film your partner shooting when they think the rifle's loaded and they're going to make this shot. And they're going to notice then that I flinched, I closed my eyes, I jerked the trigger, whatever they're doing.
So we do something sometimes. One of my guides did it, especially with a younger girl that was trying to kill a cow elk. And he could tell she was just shaking, so excited, so nervous, because she trained a lot, and it all comes down to this moment, right? He hands her the rifle, takes the shell out of the chamber.
Before he handed it
to her, and then closed it and said, kill that elk.
Yep.
And when she pulled the trigger, it was like, and she would have totally missed. It would have been bad. She might have hit somewhere else in the herd or some farmer's tractor somewhere in Timbuktu or whatever. But he was like, let's try that again, And so he had take a couple dry fires. And on the last one, he didn't tell her, but he actually put a shell in.
Yeah.
and closed it and said, okay, put it right on her shoulder and squeeze that trigger. And boom, she dropped that elk.
Sure.
Right? She didn't even know it was going to go off.
Right.
And sometimes that's a really good thing to practice while we're on our own is you can have a buddy, especially if you're hunting with a buddy, because if you put the shell on yourself, you know there's one in the gun. But you can open that bolt and your buddy can kind of fiddle with it a little bit and be like, okay, shoot again. And if you jerk,
you're going to know it.
You're going to know it.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
good training, guys. Work with that in the field this spring and summer before the fall season. It really helps a lot. I use that same technique to cure people who do have a consistent flinch.
Yeah.
Yeah, you flinch. It's that, no, listen. You need to look at your crosshair and see where you're aiming and watch the bullet fly to that point. Of course, you can't see the bullet, but the idea is to try. That means you're going to hold steady, not jerk, and keep your eyes open and watch. And you should be able to say that your crosshair or your front sight, whatever you're using, was behind his shoulder, in front of his shoulder, under his brisket, wherever it was when it went click. That's calling your shot.
Yeah.
And when you see that enough times without the actual firing of a live round, you get to be pretty good because you go, wait a minute, I've been jerking the trigger. I've been closing my eyes. This is not good stuff. Yeah. You learn to shoot, and it doesn't cost you anything because you're not shooting up these $3 to $4 shot cartridges.
Yeah.
And then you gradually transition into the real thing.
Yeah.
And I've done that myself years ago. I had the same thing. Buddy loaded it behind me and all that. I clicked, and by the time he actually put a round in that 30-06, I was so concentrating on making that perfect shot that I did.
Yeah.
Dead center, you know?
And so, and when I say that hang back a little bit, and I want to say something really quick too, is when I say hang back a little, I'm not saying hang back 800 yards so that you have all the time in the world. You still want to be ethical and reasonable about your ranges, but 300 or 400 yards is not a terribly difficult shot. I would say that's actually pretty average in the West for many of us. Even before I had a dialing turret scope, I would shoot 350 yards. We just sight in our rifle for 250.
Yeah.
Right? But going along with that, like I shot a bear in Alaska this fall. This is the first fall bear I've ever shot. I was hunting moose, and I found a black bear, which was quite a feat where I was, apparently. The natives that I showed the moose and the bear were like, you killed a bear? I was like, yeah.
It's kind of an unusual species up there, huh?
And so I go up there, and I remember the first shot, nothing happened. And it was so cold, my firing pin had frozen.
No.
And so I was like, okay, I racked another one in and pulled the trigger, nothing happened, right? And so I take all the shells out of the gun, and I just kind of cycle the firing pin a few times until I really hear that click happening really hard. Okay. And then I load everything back in.
Smart.
But for whatever reason during that time, I'd calmed down. And I had jerked pretty bad on the first shot. Mm-hmm. And so I calmed down, and I shot. I knew exactly where I hit the bear.
Yep.
It was calm. The bear takes off running and then kind of sits up on its haunches, and but kind of behind a little muskeg. And all I can see was about its head and the beginnings of its shoulder. Mm-hmm. And I just remember thinking, if I am right over the top of its head at this range with where I'm currently dialed to, I should hit it, and it should actually go around this little muskeg hill, and I'll hit it right in the shoulder.
Right in there. Mm-hmm.
It was only like 300 yards. It wasn't terribly far, but I shot, and I hit right where I aimed. And I remember the clarity of thought was like, I shouldn't be thinking this clearly right now. You know? And
that's just not me.
It's not me. Usually it's so muddled, and you know. But I think that, you know, Navy SEALs come and people that are in Delta Force, people that are like high, and I'm not comparing myself to those people by any means. I am pretty cool, I guess, but but I would say that, you know, a lot of the times they say that they do better under pressure because they've trained so much. It's like time slows down for them. And I guess the best thing I could recommend as far as prepping with your rifle, more than actually the equipment that you have, is being confident with the rifle that you do own and the scope that you do own out to the reasonable ranges that scope and rifle setup allows, which honestly for most people is 400 yards or less. I don't think I'd recommend almost anybody shooting over 500 yards at an animal.
Yeah. I recommend they train for those.
It's like archery hunting.
Yeah. If you can hit fairly consistently at 500, 600, 700 yards, you're going to be deadly at 3.
Yes.
Once you've done it. I can remember when I was younger, and of course we didn't have rangefinders, any of that stuff, so it was always like, it's kind of far. What do you think? Let's try it.
Yeah.
But once I started shooting in practice at those distances and seeing that my bullet landed where I wanted it to.
Makes you very confident.
There, you get your confidence built up. So, then suddenly, once I was hitting all the time at 300 yards, 200-yard shots were a slam dunk. And then when I went to 400 or 500 yards for practice, the 300-yard shot was, this is easy. He's close. Yeah.
And I think that the cool thing about that is the more you train, I guess where I'm going with what I was just describing too, is the more you train before you go on the elk hunt, and the more you train for running around in a circle, getting your heart rate up, getting some of that anxiety up inside yourself, building some adrenaline inside, and then learning to calm down relatively quickly before you shoot, the more you do that, it's going to become muscle memory. And it's going to become easier and easier for you to know exactly what's going to happen. And you've trained for that situation to happen. Part of that just comes with experience in general and just getting out there and going elk hunting or just hunting in general. But the more you train back home, the easier it's going to be to learn what happens in the field.
Okay. Well, that brings us to mental preparation. And professional athletes do this.
Yeah.
I don't care how good you are. The best ones do this. They run through the entire scenario. I am going to see that baseball coming at me at 100 miles an hour. I'm going to see the stitches on it. I'm going to read the words on it. I'm going to know exactly how it's curving or not. And I am going to swing level like this or that. And whatever they need to do, they run that through their brain before every time they come up to bat. And I think we should do the same thing with shooting our guns. I will routinely, when I'm dreaming about this upcoming hunt, driving to the hunt, or even while I'm hunting sometimes, and you're going to hike 2-3 miles to get to a good spot where you're really going to find game.
Yeah.
I'll be running those scenarios through my head. What happens if there's one on the other slope and I'm on this steep slope on this side? I cannot lie prone. I'm not even going to think about going prone. I'm going to probably have to get behind a big rock or over a log or sit and put my shooting sticks under my forend, make my shot that way. I'm going to see that at 300 yards, my bullet's going to rise 4 inches in an arc, and then it's going to drop 3 inches, and I'm going to hit him right in the heart if I hold here on him. I just run through all that stuff so I have that confidence in my brain. Yeah. And boy, when it happens like that, you just, wow, that's the way it was supposed to happen. I envisioned it before it happened.
Yeah.
That's your mental preparation. But what about, oh my God, look at the size of that rack.
Don't look at the rack.
Don't look at the rack.
Even if you want to look at the rack.
Well, how do you handle that part?
Oh, man. I don't.
That's where you fall apart.
No, I mean, I shot a mule deer this year, and I shot a mule deer last year. I will say, I was in Nebraska hunting, and I was just hunting a management whitetail. But one of the guys that was with me was hunting a trophy mule deer, and I come up over this rise, and we're looking in this kind of like this alfalfa rye field. Mm-hmm. I think it was rye, actually. But I see this deer, and I glass it, and I was like, oh my gosh, that thing is huge. Mm-hmm. And it was not season yet. The season didn't open until the next day, so we couldn't shoot this deer. But I guessed that deer at about 190, maybe 200, just by glancing at him. And then we bopped back over the hill, hoping he'd be there in the morning. He was there in the morning. He moved off. We weren't able to get a shot at him. And then we ended up killing a different deer. But then the ranch owner's mother ended up shooting that deer that we'd seen. It scored 224. And I will tell you, in the moment when I saw that buck, when I came up over the hill, everything went away. Like, I was just like, oh my gosh, if I had a rifle right now, I would have to spend 10 minutes just calming down.
Yeah, you would have missed.
But because I probably would have missed that animal.
Yeah.
I would have slapped that trigger so hard. So it happens to the best of us. Like, honestly, there's things that still affect me. If you say elk or mule deer and things like that, most of the time I don't get excited because I've shot so many of them. I just know what's going to happen. And it's not just me that's knowing what's going to happen. I've guided for so many people that have shot animals that it's like I just gotta know the run-of-the-mill things.
Experience always helps. The more you've done it, the more calm you can be.
If you put a bobcat in front of me, I lose
out.
Everything. I missed 3 bobcats last year. 3 bobcats, Ron. 3. But if you put an elk in front of me, I'd likely hit it.
Well, he's bigger.
Yeah. Well, the bobcats were a lot closer, too.
Yeah. Well, getting exciting and rushing your shot, I think those two together are probably 90% of the botched shots. You just get too excited and you rush it. So what mental games can we recommend people use to prevent that, or to at least slow it down enough to make a competent shot? What do you do?
There's a few. The mental game stretches past more than just the time for the shot, but let's focus on the time for the shot. And then we can talk a little bit more about how the mental game actually affects your ability to keep hunting.
All right.
And your success rates in that regard too. Because I would say that when you're out hunting, and when I have a client, especially if they've never hunted before, I'm always worried about what's going to happen when they actually get the elk in front of them, right? And so usually what I do is, like, archery hunting's hard because you're always up close and personal with the animal. Mm-hmm. You have to be. Mm-hmm. And so helping them be like, I'll go through trainings with them is like, when you draw your bow back, regardless of the situation, if that elk looks like it's about to run, you're going to go through the same scenario in your head. You're going to take a breath in. As you draw that breath in, you're going to draw your bow back. And then release it, settle into your shot, and then take your shot, right? Where if they have that process that they follow every time.
I was going to say, that's a process.
It's now just
step 1, step 2, step 3.
Yes.
Go through it every time.
Every time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way. That would calm you down because you're thinking more about your process than you are about these big antlers that are freaking you out.
Even if it's a cow, that's a lot of meat. You're thinking about all that meat that you're about to get, and then you miss.
That's absolutely true because I've felt it and seen it and done it myself many times. It's like I have been hunting for, let's say, 30, 40 years when I was younger, and that's all I'd done. It's a lot longer now, but it always amazed me that sometimes I would get buck fever just trying to shoot my meat doe. For why, I don't exactly know, but it's the same mental process of freaking out for no good reason. You just need to calm yourself down and go, no, wait a minute. It helps me to think about, what is my job here? I'm a professional. My job is to get close enough, find a clean shot, and when I think I have that shot, set up and take it.
Yes.
As a professional, I know what to do. I know I can do this. I guess it's a confidence thing.
It is.
You know you can do it, so why get freaked out and blow it?
Yeah.
Well, but it still happens.
It does. It does.
does.
And I did door-to-door sales. Going with that, I did door-to-door sales for like 4 years, and I was a manager at certain points along the way. And all the guys would come to me because if you didn't make a sale, you didn't get paid for the day.
That'll get you excited.
It gets you real anxious is what it does. And everybody would be like, I'm not going to make a sale today. I was like, dude, you made a sale, at least one sale every day for the last week. Why wouldn't you make one today? Mm-hmm. They're like, well, I don't know. It's just, I can't do it. It's like, but you've already done it. You can do it.
Negative attitude.
If you miss an elk or if you miss a bobcat, in my experience, all of a sudden now when that elk shows up or the bobcat shows up, you're like, I'm going to miss it anyway. And so sometimes the mental game isn't necessarily just the preparation work into it. It's if you have had a bad experience, just choosing to believe in yourself. If you miss the first elk you ever shoot at, or the first deer you ever shoot at, even if it's a whitetail, or the first wild hog you ever shoot at, you're really not that special. Almost everybody does it, right? It's a very common thing for people to miss or to, I hate to say, wound animals when they're first getting into hunting. And that can make a sour experience, and then they get nervous the next time, right?
Yep.
And so just choosing to believe that, like, okay, it happened. Now you know what you need to work on. You've worked on it, and you have to actually work on it. If you don't work on it, you can't say that you worked on it. But now you know you've worked on it. You've gone through all those things. What's to say that you wouldn't be able to make the animal to make the good shot, right?
Yeah. If you know what you can do and you're confident, yeah. Why would you even start to think that I'm going to blow this?
Yeah.
That's not going to help.
No.
You're going to do it. You know you can do it, so calm down, do what you're supposed to do, and you do it.
Yes, and that's all you do.
Boy, was that ever easy.
Just do it.
Okay, so there's your mental game. You've got the right equipment. You mentioned being in shape.
Yes.
That's going to hurt a lot of folks. It's going to keep you from getting your game.
It is.
How does this all play out?
So we had a guy who was a wonderful person. Actually, it happens about every year that we have somebody that comes out, usually several people that come out, and they shoot an animal. They can't even make it to the animal that they've shot. Maybe they've shot across a canyon. Even if it's only 300 yards across, you may have to hike a mile to get to the animal.
Down and up, and they can't get there.
Exactly. And so we have usually one or two every year that aren't able to get to an animal that they've shot, which is fine in a guided hunt or even a semi-guided hunt because we're able to help bail you out a little bit. That's why you're paying us. Mm-hmm. But if you're on your own on a DIY type situation and you shoot an animal and now you're not able to get it, in some states, wanton waste is a felony. In most states, it's a misdemeanor of a very high
Yeah, it's going to cost
charged misdemeanor, right? So that's a big deal. Also, I would say a third of our clients, no matter how much we tell them they have to get in shape, don't get into shape in the correct ways. And so that's partially my fault as an outfitter, is I need to help them understand what they need to prepare for better, which I'm going to try really hard to do this year. But as you know, it's very different. They're like, oh, I'm in Tennessee and I put on a backpack and I walk with my kid in my backpack every day, right? That's very different than running stairs with your backpack on. There's going to be less oxygen in the air here. It's like God put all the oxygen at sea level, and he was like, oh crap, I got to put some of the mountains too, right? But he'll do that, and there's just not as much oxygen in the air.
So how do you train for that in Tennessee?
So you're going to have to train way harder at sea level.
Twice as hard at sea
level in order to be prepared here.
Okay.
Now, you don't have to know everything. You don't have to be in like Olympian's shape. Like if you look at my body underneath this shirt, I am not an Olympic athlete, but I pride myself in being able to walk up a mountain.
Okay.
Right. So I guess where I'm going with that too is it's going to be harder for people to train, especially because they don't have mountains to walk up. But it's the muscles that you need to build. A lot of guys come out and their lungs are in good shape, and they're able to handle the amount of effort that their lungs are being put on, but they can't walk up or downhill because they didn't have hills to walk up to train those quad muscles or the little muscles on the sides of the ankles that help when you're side hilling.
I have found throughout my career that putting the pack on, strapping the rifle on, or a substitute, something of that equal weight, just all the equipment you're going to take hunting, and then start walking in rough country if you can find it. If you're living in the flats of Kansas or South Dakota, you've got your stairs, stadium stuff. We've always said, go to the local stadium and climb up and down the stairs.
Yeah.
That's not bad. You're getting the quad muscles shaped
put your
up to
backpack
go in
on
there.
and do it.
But do it with 30 pounds on your back, and then move to 50 pounds. And if you can, move to 60 and even 80 pounds. The more overly shaped you are, the better you're going to be when you get here. Another trick is to get out here 2 or 3 days early and get acclimated.
Yes, and I always recommend at least 24 hours.
Yeah, at least. But when you do that, another thing is I always recommend is taking summer vacations with your family even. If you're going out to Montana or Nevada or wherever, go out there during the summer, go camping, take your family along, look at the country, get familiar with it. Because a lot of what freaks people out and makes them perform poorly when they come out into the mountains hunting is that they've never been there before. Yeah. It's a foreign environment and it freaks you out.
It does.
Yeah.
I've got to say that I can't tell you how many people come out and they're like, I got this. And then we start hiking and they're like, I don't got this. Right. And it's funny, but it's sad at the same time because they paid me to take them out and now they can't do anything. Right? Yeah. And that's not necessarily my fault. It's not necessarily their fault.
It's their fault.
It is their fault. But I'm not going to say it. But let's say, we had a guy this last year shoot an elk. He wasn't able to go get to it, which is fine because we were there. But had we not been there, it would have been a really big deal. Also, I would say about a third of the people, we will find elk. Like I can find elk a lot. Usually almost on a daily basis. I'll go out and I'll glass up some elk and then we could make a plan to get to them. About a third to half of our clients are either not willing to or not capable of getting to about half to 2/3 of the elk that we find. Because they're in difficult places to get to because they're elk. Yeah. Right. So it's not just being able to get an animal out. It's also are you capable of getting to the elk? And the more capable and in shape you are, the more elk you're going to be able to go after, which raises your opportunity and chances of killing an elk. So
this brings up the topic of hunting partners. I don't recommend anyone come out into the mountain states, especially wilderness areas, and hunt solo. No. There are people who can do it, obviously. I used to do it myself.
I do it quite
there's
often.
All sorts of dangers involved in that. You get incapacitated and there's nobody there to help you get out. You can't physically get yourself out. But not even worried about getting yourself hurt, can you find your game? So you better have a partner who can help you cross that canyon, cut up and pack out that meat, because that is your responsibility. Your job as a hunter is not just to get out there, find an animal, and shoot him and go, yippee for me, I got him. You've got to get him home and turn him into hamburgers and steaks. You've got a big job ahead of you.
Which is not arguable in my opinion, which is almost better than the kill itself in some regards. Now you get to enjoy that animal for a whole year.
Oh, yeah.
Right, especially if it's an elk. With a deer, you could eat it in a month or two. But
Yeah, but that's why you have to have 2 or 3 deer tags.
no, I would 100% agree with that. I would highly recommend everybody goes with at least one buddy if you're elk hunting.
All right, now how do you pick your buddy so you don't end up with some guy who says, I'm too tired this morning, or I don't want to go over that mountain, that's too much work. And
I get the opportunity to hunt with a lot of wonderful people as a guide, but I also get the opportunity to hunt with a lot of people that I would never want to hunt with again. And so you're going to want to, like, before I go hunting with people, not only will your hunting partner potentially put you in more dangerous situations if you pick the wrong hunting partner,
yeah,
you may just hate the entire hunt because he's super annoying or something like that, right?
Yeah, I've heard of that plenty of times.
Yeah, so I usually tell people to find a hunting partner that they could just go on a drive with and just talk and be happy to be with that person.
And what about working with somebody? I always found out if you can have a little project together where you've got to do some manual labor fairly hard, is the guy going to keep a good attitude the whole time?
Is he going to do his fair share of the work?
Yes, do his fair share and or more. Because I have some friends who I cannot believe how helpful they are. They'll go out of their way to help. And it's just like,
those friends, Ron. I hope I'm one of those friends.
Well, you've got another chance to prove yourself. But yeah, so be careful who you take. I set up a kid one time to come out and hunt with me on elk, and I told him at that time I was pretty busy as an outdoor writer, and I said, if I get an assignment to go somewhere, I might not even be able to hunt with you. So are you okay hunting by yourself? Well, I said, I'll show you where to go. I'll show you the maps. I'll tell you what you need to know. He wanted to bring a friend along from back home, which makes perfect sense. Driving across the country, you split the duties up. Well, his friend didn't get prepared. The kid that I was talking to, I told him what he needed to do with the pack and the going up and down the stairs, the best shape of your life.
He didn't relay that information, though.
He told his buddy that same stuff, but his buddy decided drinking beer all summer was the way to get in shape for an elk hunt. So that just didn't work out for him. I mean, the kid ended up having a one-day elk hunt because at the end of that day, his buddy made him go home. He wouldn't go out again. He almost died out there. He didn't even carry the compasses he was supposed to carry. He didn't have a pack with his essentials in it and all the rest of it. Yeah. So you've got to pick your partner very carefully and make sure that they're doing things the same way you're doing it, being prepared. Yeah. And then the two of you or the 3 or 4 of you working as a team can really increase your chances for success.
Yes. And also your chances of not dying as well. If you're both very capable and confident and are going to help each other. I once shot an elk. It was the first bull elk I ever shot. I didn't really have a lot of experience, and I shot this elk. We found this elk herd at the bottom of the mountain. We walked all the way to the top. I was with a buddy who was a very capable hunter.
You found the elk at the bottom of the mountain, so you went to the top? This doesn't make sense.
They went up. So
the elk went to the top of the mountain. Okay.
At the very in the wintertime, in the winter months, November, December, when there's snow on the ground, it's very common for the elk to come all the way down to the bottom into the foothills or into the ag fields, feed, and then go all the way back up to the top of the mountain to escape predation and other such things. In this experience, the elk were at the bottom of the mountain because they'd been chased by wolves, and then we chased them right back to the top. Which is
poor elk.
Yeah, poor elk. I would have shot the wolves before the elk, trust me. But I ended up shooting a little 6-point bull. It was the first bull I ever shot, and it was not an easy hike. Like, I was only maybe 3.5 miles from the truck, but I was also almost 2,600 vertical feet up. Mm-hmm. So now, and it's very steep. So, in about a mile and a half, I'm dropping almost 2,400 vertical feet.
And then you got to go back up for another load.
I got to go back up for another load. I didn't even know how to quarter an elk at this point in my life.
My.
So what I did is I cut the elk's head off and then dragged it down the mountain. Whole.
You dragged
I dragged like a 600 or 700 pound animal down this mountain with paracord that's cutting into my waist and everything else. My buddy that was with me was pretty worthless at this point because he bashed his knee on a rock on the way up because he slid in the snow and bashed his knee on a rock, so he can barely walk. We got back to the truck at about 2 a.m, and I'd shot the elk at about 11 p.m.
Yeah.
And we were about frozen. Like, if I wouldn't have had a truck within a mile, within a reasonable distance. Like, let's say I would have been in Frank Church Wilderness. We easily could have froze to death right there.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got to be prepared for everything. But that, I think we're getting kind of far afield here.
Yeah.
If we're going to get into wilderness survival, we can do that another time.
No, but your buddy, like, it would have been a lot easier if my buddy would have known how to cut up the elk too, and he would have been able.
And my friend who had the friend who was totally unprepared for the whole operation, if he'd have been more careful in choosing his partner, he would have been able to hunt the next day. Instead, he had to go home. Can you imagine coming out here from the eastern states all the way out to the west for one day of hunting, and your partner whines and cries and wants to go home and makes you take him home? Can't believe
I
it.
think I would tell him to go hitchhike on the highway. Yeah, I'd be like, I'm staying here and hunting. You can be a baby somewhere else.
So be prepared. Now, we were talking about, I'm forgetting now what I was going to say. We were talking about, when you guys are deciding to come out for some distant elk hunt, a pronghorn hunt even, anything out west, away from home, you're going to take your big hunt somewhere else. You get all prepared and everything else. Do you hunt by yourself? Do you hunt with a friend who lives out here? Do you hire a professional? Do you get an outfitter? What about people who really want to go mule deer or elk hunting, and they go, how do I find this stuff out in the Rocky Mountains? It's just so foreign to me. Should I hire a guide? You are a professional guide. You're also a do-it-yourself hunter, and it sounds like you do these hunts where you're sort of an advisor rather than a hold your hand kind of guide.
And that's primarily what I do anymore. I don't guide a whole lot of hunts in the traditional sense anymore. Here's the problem with going on a guided hunt, is that you may let's take elk for example, because that's primarily what I do. I've done a lot of mule deer as well, but let's take elk for example. The average elk hunt for like an over-the-counter tag is about $8,000.
That's what the outfitters charge you for the hunt.
That's what the outfitters charge you for the hunt.
That's a lot of money.
You can find some for as little as, like, on sale for $5,000. Sometimes you can find good deals for $6,500. But most of the time, those lower-end hunts are not going to have a huge success rate.
Why are they lower-end hunts? How do you define a lower-end hunt?
So there's primarily two types of hunting units in the West. There's what I would call like limited entry or a draw tag, or a general season unit, which may still be a draw, but it's much easier to draw. So in a general season unit, they give out a lot more tags, and there's usually a lower density of animals.
Yeah, higher density of hunters, lower density of animals, lower chance of getting one.
Yes. Now, if you do a limited entry tag, usually there's a lower population of hunters and a higher population of animals.
Okay. So that's probably your preference, but it's harder to get the tag.
Harder to get the tag. You may have to wait 20 years.
So is an outfitter, and I've been with some of these outfitters, they're on public land. You know, you think, I've got an outfitted hunt. My chance for success is going way up. This guy's going to know where everything is. We're going to have an up on everybody else. You get there, and there are 14 rigs camped at the trailhead.
Yep.
They're all hunting the same place that you're hunting.
Yes.
Suddenly you realize, I don't really have an advantage here.
No.
Other than somebody's taking some weight out of my pocket.
Well, and there are benefits of hiring a guide, right? If you're inexperienced and you don't know an area, a lot of times those guides will know the area better than you would. And they usually know where the elk, like if you came in and I guided somebody where I grew up hunting, I usually, especially this time of year, which is in December, I could tell you where there's going to be like 3 or 4 elk herds every day.
Yeah, you know where the elk are. I think that's the main thing we want when we hire an outfitter. Take me to the animals.
Yes. Here's the thing with outfitters, though, and this is not all outfitters, but it is a lot of them, and you have to be careful with it. I was guilty of this my first year as an outfitter, and I feel really bad because I had some amazing clients that I didn't necessarily live up to their expectations or my expectations of what I desired for them.
Okay.
Is that as an outfitter, there's a lot of unknowns. And there's not a lot of profit margins as an outfitter. There can be, but in general season hunting, it's a lot more expensive than you would think to take somebody hunting for a week and have a really good experience for people. Mm-hmm. Food, lodging, horses, especially if you have horses. Oh my gosh, I could spend $8,000 a week on vet bills on horses. But all those things add up, and then sometimes outfitters hire guys that have never even hunted in the unit.
Oh yeah.
So I had a guy complain to me. He's like, I want to take your course because I took a guided hunt, spent $10,000. I get out there, and the guide's like, I've never hunted elk before. This is my first year.
The guide confessed
So I was like, first of all, that was a terrible guide. He's really screwing that outfitter over. But the thing to recognize is that even though outfitters usually are supposed to know the area, and likely the outfitter knows the area. Sometimes outfitters are not really good businessmen. They're an outdoorsman that thought it'd be cool to work in the outdoors. Mm-hmm. And so they don't necessarily have the great organization. Sometimes I call them dictators instead of guides, because they're like, these are all my rules for my outfitting business, and if you don't follow them, then you can leave for all I care.
Boy,
right?
that makes you feel at home, huh?
Yeah. So there's a lot of things to watch out for, just like in any industry. There's a lot of wonderful outfitters that truly care about their clients and set things up very, very well. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the time, I would say even 50% of the time, those outfitters are not the greatest at planning. They're not the greatest at, and like I said, I was guilty of this too. So I'm not, but I'm trying to, I've worked really hard to remedy all those things to make sure that everything is, my I's are dotted, my T's are crossed, everybody's happy and gets a great experience.
I thought your eyes were crossed.
That happens occasionally too, Ron. But so there's things to watch out for with booking a guide, and it's not always the right answer, especially if you want to learn how to do it on your own. A lot of people, when I was guiding, would originally call me and say, I want to do a guided hunt. Can you teach me how to hunt elk?
So they want two things. They want a guide outfitter, but they also want to learn from you, which is normal. You're going to learn from somebody anyway if you pay attention and they know what they're doing. The
problem with most outfitters and most guides is that they don't want you to know why the elk are in certain areas, because they don't want you to come back to these areas.
Yep. Because if you're hunting on public land, you hire the guide, he takes you to the hot spot. He doesn't want you to probably blindfold you when he takes you in.
Yes, and it's like, here, he'll lead you to that animal, say, here, pull the trigger on that animal. Mm-hmm. We'll pack it out for you.
Now go away, don't come back.
Then now go away, don't come back unless you give me $8,000 again. Right?
Got it.
Where I actually really enjoyed teaching people about
Yeah, you've told me that. You would rather take somebody out for less money and help them along the way to teach them to hunt for themselves. That's different for an outfitter. Why are you thinking that way?
Maybe I'm not a good businessman. I don't know.
You already mentioned that.
But honestly, there's a few reasons that I structured my business the way I did. So instead of taking, like maximum, you can only take 2 people each as a guide if you're just trying to guide them into an animal.
Oh, you mean 2-on-1?
2-on-1 guiding. Okay. So you can take 2 hunters per one guide, right?
Okay.
And even then, you're stretching your limits somewhat. I think my best week ever, I got 3 guys elk in 3 days.
Wow.
3 bulls, not cows. I've killed 5 cows in one day with clients. But,
oh my goodness.
But I lost my train of thought, Ron.
Well, you were killing cows, and you were going to tell us all about how to get a cow.
That's not what I was talking about.
Not?
So I guess where I'm going with that too is when outfitters, if you want to learn how to hunt, where I like to structure it was I can take now 8 or 12 people out, and I actually don't even lower the success rates or the shot opportunity rates more than if I was to do 2-on-1 guiding. And now I have 4 clients to 1 guide, not including myself. So that's not a true number, but I'm teaching them as we go how to do it on their own. And then they're way more confident and competent by the end of the week.
Oh, so when you start off, you've got a crowd of 6 to 8 people, and you're saying, guys, we can't all hunt in a big clump here, but what you need to look for are...
Yeah, and we teach them everything to look for. We teach them how to... elk specific at this point. I haven't branched into bears or mule deer or anything, but I teach them how to call in elk. I teach them where to find elk, how to glass for elk, and how to work smarter, not harder.
So then do you have a schedule like go out in the morning, do what I just told you, into the areas that I suggested you look.
Exactly.
And then come back in the midday and we'll do a little report, and I'll tell you what your next step should be or what you did wrong or what you did right.
Yes.
So you're just mentoring them.
We're mentoring them.
As they hunt.
Yeah. So the first 2 days, it's very much we reel them back. It's a 7-day thing that we do here. We reel them back. We teach them a whole bunch of information. It's like a fire hose, right?
Yeah.
And then the next 2 days, we have guides that are with them a majority of the time, helping them, teaching them about how to cover terrain if they do see an animal from across a canyon, how to get close enough for an ethical shot. And then the last 2 to 3 days, depending on the desires of the person,
they're by themselves.
They're relatively on their own. We don't ever have them go off on their own. They're in groups of 2.
Yeah.
But we've noticed that the success rates actually are about the same or higher than if we did a traditionally guided hunt.
Yeah, and I'll bet the satisfaction rate is higher too, it's because these guys are after 4 days of learning I get it.
Yeah.
I know where to find elk. I'll bet it's as exciting for them to see their first bull elk by themselves that they located as shooting one if you did all the work for him and said, shoot that elk.
Well, so we taught people how to like use onX to cover terrain and like look at all the topography marks and like mark where the elk was based on the topography marks. I had one guy call me this year. He calls me and he's like, hey, we found some bulls right where you told me that they would be. And I'm trying to plan a way in. I was like, well, I would probably do this, or this, go up to this canyon and go around. And he was like, okay, sounds good. And then he texts me and says, elk down, right? And we go in there and I hike in this hellhole in order to get this elk. And he's like, why didn't you just follow the fence line? And he had come up with a way better plan to get into that elk than I had. And I was like, so the student surpasses the master.
Hey, that is great.
So, but, and they were totally on their own. With archery equipment, they killed an elk on their own on the last day of the hunt.
Well, that just goes to show it can work.
It does.
Can work. And the satisfaction of doing it on your own like that is just through the roof.
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
I took my first elk by myself, solo hunt. I had been archery hunting with a couple of buddies prior to the rifle season opening. Back in those days, you could do eat. So I missed a easy shot with my bow. Shot over an elk. It's walking toward me. I called 5 bulls in one morning.
Oh, that's
crazy. It was that magical time when they just take off, that first time. Prior to that, we haven't even heard a bugle. Suddenly, they're just bugling like mad. So I do my thing, call this elk up. Oh, aren't I the cocky one? Who could miss this guy, He's as big as a barn. I could miss him. Shot right over his back. Then I brought my buddies out, like, I found him, come on. We run back out there that same day. They're still bugling. I call. I got my 2 buddies out in front of me, 20 yards in front. The bull comes walking right across the front. He missed him. Shot right over his back. But it broke the ice.
Yep.
Came back a week later when the rifle season opened, went into the same area, got up on a bull and got him all by my lonesome. Could have been a disaster, but what a feeling of accomplishment.
Yeah.
Having found the elk, called the elk, knew where they were, went back to the area, worked them again, did all the tricks that I've been reading about and learning about all these years and applying it. Bam. Once that happens, you are a hunter and you're going to stay a hunter because that gives you the incredible confidence to try the next one and the next one and the next one. And the next thing you know, you're hunting moose and you're hunting sheep and you're just, if you just strictly hunt deer, you just get confident in what you're doing and competent at doing it.
Yeah.
And then you begin to really, I always say, you suck the marrow out of the experience. You're the kind of guy who says, well, I don't really care if I don't get one or not, or I don't care if I don't fill my tag. I'm only going to go for this one buck that's got to be 24 years old. All this kind of stuff. It just all works together to make you enjoy fully your outdoor experiences.
Yes. Now, talking about enjoying the full outdoor experience, I think the last thing I want to talk about, if you're okay with it, is going back to that mental game.
No, I'm not good with that.
No, absolutely not. We don't talk about things like that.
All right, what are you going to do about the mental game?
So the biggest thing that I found from clients is keeping them motivated until they start getting success.
Oh, good point.
So they can come out and they're usually really excited, which is awesome. I love elk hunting too. I'm grateful they're excited. Usually that excitement fades off about after the first morning hunt if they don't see an elk. Right? Usually they're like, I didn't see an elk yet. It's like,
you just got here, buddy.
You just got here, buddy. It'll happen, So one of the things we teach is how to find elk, and usually that's from great distances. And they got to learn how to find ants on a mountain rather than elk, right? And so as an example, these people come out, clients come out, and one of our drop camp hunters shoots an elk. And this is on day 1, so we're doing very much instruction time period, not necessarily hunting yet. And I said, does anybody want to go and help pack this elk out and gain the experience of cutting it up and all that kind of stuff? And about 5 people raised their hand and go out and help cut this elk up. And I was like, why don't you guys just stay out there? Because it's about a 2-hour drive to this area. You cut up the elk and then hunt there for the rest of the evening. We know there's elk there. Somebody just shot one.
Yeah.
They come back so discouraged that night.
Really?
And they're like, this terrain is too steep and too dry. It's too deserty. There's no elk here. I was like, what did you just have on your back earlier this day? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. And then they were actually getting very upset with me because where I was hunting was actually very deserty, very dry, very limited amounts of water, and extremely steep. There's sheep there. It is sheep country. It's not like sheep country. Right. There's desert bighorns there. And they were like, oh my gosh, like, how dare you put us in this area where there's no elk? I was like, what do you mean? And then we went out the next day. Sure enough, elk were running up the sheep country, and he had a shot opportunity. A couple guys, one of them missed. The other guy didn't feel comfortable with the shot, which I admire. Not taking a shot you're not comfortable with.
Yeah.
And then he was like, all I had ever seen on YouTube was like dark timber country and aspens and these beautiful lush green mountains. I'd never seen a YouTube video where it was just a huge desert. And so so he'd been so discouraged, and had we not seen elk for a few days, he likely would have given up and gone home.
Yeah.
Right. And that's not specific to just him. I would say that's probably the biggest thing as an outfitter is how do you keep people in good spirits long enough for them to find elk?
Well, how do you keep yourself in good spirits
Yes.
if you don't have an outfitter? You're out here and you're thinking, I don't know what I'm doing. There's no elk here. This is ridiculous. I wasted my time and money. I'm going home.
Yeah. And so what I like to do for myself anyway is I went on a hunt. Last year was probably the least successful hunt I've ever been on. And I shot a deer. But we were looking primarily for elk in the Frank Church Wilderness of Idaho.
Yeah, that's a tough country right there.
Oh my gosh, just hiking it, it's terrible. And the animal population, the densities
Low.
are very, very low. Between the wolves, the bears, and everything else, the hunters in there, there's just not a huge population in there. And it is rugged, steep, nasty country.
You can go all day without seeing a game animal.
Yeah.
I've done it.
We went an entire week, hiked 65 miles, and saw one legal animal the entire time.
Wow, there you go.
Yeah. And so it was...
So how do you keep your spirits up?
So during that time, what we started doing is we would just talk about how grateful we were that we weren't somewhere else.
Bingo.
Right? You
Bingo.
could be at work, even though you're working really hard, and then you start joking around with each other's friends. Gratefully, I had some wonderful friends with me. We were able to joke about things and joke about how, like, oh, we're terrible hunters, right? We're not going to find anything, but we might as well try, right?
Perfect. You know, we always like to say, well, I hunt for the experience. You know, sure, getting your animal is wonderful. We all want to do that.
But that's a small part of the experience.
Yeah. You've got to enjoy the whole experience. It's true. You do have to enjoy it, but you have to tell yourself you're going to enjoy it. And then what are you going to pull out of that experience to make it joyful? You know, it might be the fact that, gee, it's a perfect, calm, warm day. I'm not freezing. I'm not wet. I'm not in the office banging away, typing on something. I'm out here in God's country seeing what 95% or more of humans will never see it or experience.
Yeah.
So what if there's not an elk or a mule deer in front of me? Look, there's a blue grouse. Look, there's a rough grouse. Look, there's that chipmunk. What's that little vole doing running up and down that log over and over again? Oh, he's getting pine nuts, and he's carrying over here, and he's burying them. You're experiencing the world, the real world, and you're learning things, and just absorb all of that. Too many of my friends, when we were younger especially, I would say, wow, look at that, whatever it was, and they'd go, what? We can't shoot that. That's just a dicky bird, or that's just some kind of a stupid rat. You don't appreciate all the things that are out there. So you do have to have a mindset.
And it's a conscious decision.
Yes, exactly. You've got to consciously decide, I want to pay attention to what's going on around me. It is all going to help me become a better hunter in future. When you think of classic wilderness hunters, native peoples anywhere, whether you're the Bushmen in Africa or down in South America, wherever these people are living cheek to jowl in nature with nature, that they know everything. They can find animals because they know all of it. They know the vegetation, they know the terrain, the weather, and what happens when this. You've got to observe that stuff. So go hunting as a naturalist in training. You want to become the Daniel Boone that can find your way and find your game, and you just have to know all the parts of it.
You do. And it's not going to happen overnight. A lot of people come out and they're like, I want to kill an elk this go around. And it's like, you may not. Yeah. You may not kill an elk this go around, even if you were fully guided one-on-one with me.
Even if you're an experienced hunter, plenty of guys have hunted elk and taken them before, end up with no elk in a certain season for whatever reason. Yeah. But you got to keep going.
What I teach people in my course is that you have to focus on all the positives that are happening throughout the day and the little wins. But you also have to focus on the process, because there's always something positive coming from the process of learning how to be a better hunter, the process of learning where elk and deer and bears usually like to be. And there's something enjoyable about that. I thought about this in depth. not a philanthropist, but I like talking like I am one, is that a lot of, yes.
You're not a philanthropist.
You're like, you're correct. You're
not even a philosopher. But I think you're going to go there.
So why is it that we enjoy hunting? Like, why is it that elk hunting is so much, like, why is it that whitetail hunters want to elk hunt? They have whitetail.
Yeah.
Why do I want to go hunt whitetail? I already elk hunt. It's the challenge of it. So it's the challenge of trying to conquer something that we are unfamiliar with and unknown.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
It's the discovery.
Yes.
We want to discover something new. And it's generally the mystery of nature.
Yeah.
Why is it there? What is there exactly? I've never done it before. I want to do it.
Yes.
I think everybody knows that inside. They might not be able to articulate it, but yeah.
It makes sense. But if you focus on the kill, all of a sudden, all of that discovery, all of that, a little bit of the, not childishness, but the desire and the curiosity. Selfishness. The curiosity of life just leaves, and all of a sudden you just have one goal, and if that goal doesn't happen, you're not happy anymore.
Yeah.
It's a pretty bad way to go through life in general.
Yeah, okay. Well, now that we've got you all depressed, how can we sum this up? I think for folks getting ready for the next season, you guys are going to be doing your training and buying all the necessary equipment, getting your tags and getting all your ducks in a row, planning for that hunt. The more you plan, the more you prepare, the better you're going to have, the better hunt you're going to have, whether you get one or not. You're probably going to get one, but what are they going to do now when they're thinking about, should I hire a guy like you? Should I hire an outfitter? Should I pay big bucks and get onto a private ranch where there's a lot of big animals? Success rate, what's your overall success rate guiding your clients?
I would say that out of the roughly between archery and rifle, we're 62%. Shot opportunity, we probably had only about 20 to 30%.
So if you would have had competent shooters, you could have taken more than 50% would have been successful at tagging an animal. But because they weren't.
Yes.
But I think the average in the West for an elk hunting is under 10% success rate.
It's about 8. Right? 8. Well, it depends on archery is about 7, rifle is 8 to 12.
Okay. So right away, you've got to have that in mind. I'm probably not going to be one of the 10% here, especially on my first hunt. So I'm going to be learning. I'm going to be having an experience, an adventure that most people don't get to have. We're going to be camping out. We're going to be hiking and climbing mountains and having a great time. And we might get lucky to shoot an elk.
Yes. Okay. And I'll close with this. Going along with tying this all together is that there's a process that you're going to want to follow here. That's why I called my business Process-Based Hunter, is because there's a process that you can follow with almost everything in life, and it helps organize your life and just helps you be more confident. The first one is get competent gear. You don't have to spend millions. I usually buy stuff from Walmart or like Temu or something, right? Like I don't spend lots of money on my gear. If you're going to buy a new rifle, I would probably recommend something 270 plus. Get good equipment that you're confident with.
270 Winchester and more powerful.
Or more powerful. That's what I'd recommend. 6.5 is sufficient though, right?
Okay.
Even a 243 is sufficient. If you already have that and you don't have money to spend on it, but you want to go elk hunting, bring it with you, right?
Okay.
Then you're going to want to get confident with that equipment.
Okay, there's that training we talked about.
Also with that, don't think that the amount of equipment or the amount of money you spend on the equipment is going to make you successful. I can't tell you how many people came out and they were like, I bought all this gear and I didn't use 3/4 of it.
Yep.
Very confident. Very common.
Common stuff.
Yep. The next one, practice shooting. Be confident, be ready, get that muscle memory down. And throughout the whole experience, make sure that you have the correct expectation, because having that correct mindset starts before you actually start hunting. Mm-hmm. Be okay with going home empty-handed, but knowing that you followed the process and knowing that you did everything you could to find an animal and you learned as much as you could throughout that way. And that ties it all together. And then regardless of what happens with the hunt, you know that much more for the next time.
I would add one thing. Set some goals for yourself. In other words,
yeah.
The only goal is not to shoot an elk or a mule deer, whatever you're after. Have smaller goals, like I'm going to climb 4,000-foot mountain in one day. Yeah. I'm going to set up my camp and I'm going to make a campfire and I'm going to be comfortable in the rain and the wind or something.
Yeah.
Little goals that lead you to becoming a better outdoorsman all the way around and a better hunter. That way you're going to have success that you can actually chalk it off. You'd have your list and go, yes, I navigated out to Montana all by myself.
Yes.
I hiked up a trail 20 miles in 2 days. I camped out overnight. I survived a grizzly bear.
I hope that one doesn't come up. But it's the little wins,
Yeah,
right?
the little wins. There you go. All right. Well, I think everybody's gotten, I hope, fired up and picked up a few tidbits and words of wisdom from you.
I hope so.
On this one, because guys, it is entirely possible for you to come out to the wonderful wild mountains of the West or any other part of the world to become an integral functioning part of nature. Consider yourself a natural predator, if you will. You are a hunter-gatherer. You are getting your sustenance from the world, the wild world, of which there is ever shrinking quantities. But we do have the opportunities yet to get there and do that. So if you're in your late teens, your early 20s, or even if you're not getting started until you're 50, you've still got the opportunity. This is your life. This is your planet. You have the right to get out here and enjoy it, the same as ancient peoples did, as Daniel Boone did, as Jack O'Connor did, and all the people have gone before us. So get out there and get your money's worth. This is your heritage. Take advantage of it. Do like Tate. Become an elk guide.
Oh,
I don't want any
hire you if
competition.
you're sufficient, but
So, hey, wishing you guys all the luck. Tate, thanks for sharing what you've learned. How many years have you been guiding hunters?
probably 7 or 8.
7 or 8.
Officially, and then I've been obviously taking people just for fun way before that. But
Yeah, well, and the point of that, reason I asked, I knew that was about what it was that it doesn't take all that long to become quite good at this game. So, bite the bullet, make your first trip out here and learn all those things. And the next year you'll be twice as good.
Yeah.
And the next year you'll be
4
pretty
times
soon,
as good.
Yeah, you're a 7-year veteran. You can find an elk every time you step out the door.
yeah, I mean, I've been guiding for 7 years, and pretty easily, I would say, personally, I've killed 20 elk, and I've probably been on close to 180 to 200 elk kills at this point.
There's not a lot of things in life you can do where within 7 years of trying, you're that good.
Yeah.
You're professional all the way.
Find a good mentor, though, because I know people that hunt for 5 years never get any better. You got to know what you're doing wrong and right so that you can improve upon those things.
Okay. If you guys are looking for a mentor, here's one. Tate. He won't charge you $8,000.
No, not even half that.
All right. Thanks for tuning in, folks. We do hope you put together one heck of an adventure for next year, and we wish you all the best of luck and wish you great success. If you have any questions, comment, send it in. You can go to ronspomeroutdoors.com. We have a comment section in there. You can ask questions there. Have you got that at your site, Process-Based Hunter?
Yep, we have a whole bunch of information there regarding us. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to email into us, call us, text us, whatever. And we're more than happy to answer questions about our courses and about hunting in general.
So people can still sign up for your courses before this hunting season?
Yeah, so I have elk, I have archery courses still available, and we just opened up a muzzleloader course, which is kind of a mix between rifle and archery. Another option for those of you who want to rifle hunt would be our elk hunting boot camp. That's something that we teach, especially in mountain shooting with rifles, but we also teach all the same information as our semi-guided course, but we're not actually hunting. So if you have a tag in the fall, or if you just want to get into it in a very introductory way into elk hunting, we teach all the same kind of information in our elk hunting boot camp. Ron might even be there if I twist his arm enough.
I'll learn the hard way.
And that's even cheaper than our semi-guided course. It's very affordable, only about 3 days. And even if you don't have a tag, we're going to teach you how to obtain a tag. We're going to help you understand a lot of the fundamentals of Western hunting, and then we're going to teach you how to go find the elk and be successful.
All right. There you have it. Thanks, Tate.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time on Ron Spomer Outdoors Podcast. Hunt honest and shoot straight.